Okay, we are going to start on the little girl's dress, and one of the first things I'm going to do and show you is how to do a flat collar. A flat collar is very tricky because it just sits on the garment all the way around, and it's almost flat on the garment, but it is up a little bit in the neck at the center back. But putting it on, you have to make sure you get it to where your collar will lay flat. So that's the tricky part. So I'm going to show you how to do that today. The first thing I'm going to show you is that I've cut out the bodice right here, and it has tucks all along here, so that's why it looks extra long, but I will work on that later. And so I'm just going to go and sew my shoulder seams here, and I've also got my lining. So I'm going to line the bodice. We like to line the bodices of the little girl's dress. It makes them so much nicer. And it's actually a very easy way to finish off your neck edge. And because it will close all the seams, and it's a great way to finish off the waist seam because it will also close the seams, much like our burrito method on the yoke. So we'll get to that later. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to sew the shoulder seams of this bodice and the lining. Sometimes we have you sew the side seams as well, but I'll just go ahead and do the shoulder seams for now. Okay, the other thing I'm going to do is, here's my collar, and I have cut 4 of the pieces of the collar because I need a collar and the collar facing for each side. So I'm just going to take the first 2, and those are going to be my collar, and then I'll put that away for the collar facing. And then I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I want to see what side I want to have the side showing, and this does look like a broadcloth, and so it's probably the same on both sides. So I'm going to use, here's my set, and one of them is going to be the left side and one will be the right side. Okay, then I'm going to go ahead and put my interfacing on there. Now I have cut out 2 pieces of interfacing, and they match the collar. I've used the exact collar pattern, and I've already done, the only marking that I really needed to do was here at the triangle, which is at the shoulder seam. Everything else is, like this circle is 5/8 in from the style edge, and 3/8 from the neck edge. So also I want to notice on my pattern, it says 3/4 inch for your neck seam. So that means that this particular seam right here, I will sew at 3/8. This will be 5/8. Every other seam is 5/8 unless they tell you otherwise. So because this, for a little girl's dress, it's so curved and difficult to put on such a small little curve, that they usually have you do a smaller seam, because even if you sewed 5/8, you would trim it down to 3/8. So they're just going to have you go ahead and do it at 3/8, which is a lot easier to sew. Okay, so here's my interfacing, and I am going to go ahead and lay this on the wrong side of each of these collars. Okay, and I'm going to put these on here so that they match exactly. I've cut them out of the same pattern, so they should match. So I'm going to get those on, and then I'm going to baste around this collar at 1/4 inch. Okay, so it looks like we've got that on. So I'm going to go ahead and pin that. I think one thing I do like to do whenever I put interfacing on like this is I like to press it good so that they start to kind of mesh, bond together. Then I'm going to pin them, and I'm going to baste 1/4 inch all the way around. And then I'll go ahead and sew up these 2 seams. So I'll be back after we get that done. Okay, so I am going to press the interfacing to the collar, and I do this because I want them to work together and become compatible. So if I kind of start with ironing them together, that helps. And I noticed I had a little fuzz in there. I want to get that out. Oh, let's see. And then as soon as I go ahead and press these, then I will baste them. Okay, and while I'm at it, I'm also going to press my seam open on my lining, and then I'm going to trim this down. Ooh. Huh, okay, I'm going to trim this down a little bit because I don't need such a long seam allowance on the lining of this little dress. So this is a time when I would trim, but I'm not going to grade. So I'm just gonna trim this down to about 3/8, so I'll take off a quarter. Like I said, I don't need that extra seam allowance on this lining. This seam will end up being an enclosed seam because the lining will cover it up. So there's that one. And I'm going to go ahead and trim this down while I'm at it. And I've trimmed this to 3/8. So I think I will trim the actual dress part to 1/2 inch. I'll just take a little bit off that too. So I'm going to grab that while I'm ironing here. And I'm going to go ahead and press those shoulder seams open as well, so that when I get my collar done, I can put it right on the neck seam. Now there is one thing I need to do that I just realized that I haven't done before I sewed this, was to do my stay stitching. So I will go back and stay stitch, and then I will baste the collar. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and baste the interfacing to the collar, and I'll just use the little 1/4 inch mark here on my throat plate, and it's just right by where the feed control is. Sometimes as I'm going around that curve, it's such a tight curve that I sometimes have to lift my presser foot to readjust. Okay, but you want to be careful. You don't want to, you want to keep it nice and smooth if you can. But this is the interfacing, so I'm not as particular with this as I will be when I do the style edge. Okay. I'm going to go all the way around to keep it on nice and so it won't shift on me. It'll stay right where it's supposed to be. Okay. All right. Okay.